talk a little bit about the birth of Jesus, and I realized that with the reading and the meditation, you have all the information that you need. But it's always interesting to explore a little more, a little deeper. So the birth of Jesus was not on anybody's radar for 3 or 4 centuries after the birth of Christ. And yet, all of our birthdays are recorded by those years. 1946 is 1946 years after the birth of Christ. So each of us is connected, although we may not realize it and think of it very. So the story of the birth of Jesus, it was decided by Constantine, the Roman emperor, that we had to get all this Christian stuff. He became Christian, and so he decided we have to call a group of people to compile this testament, this New Testament. And a very small part of the New Testament, I guess only a couple of the Gospels actually record the birth of Jesus. So most of it's a story. And I'm not disparaging the story because it's a beautiful story, and we have created a beautiful religious homage to this story. And we have to remember that each of us is born a Christ child. Each of us is born. On the day we are born, another Christ child is born. They had no idea what the date of the birth, and so they decided the Romans decided to make it part of the Saturnalia celebrations of the end of the harvest and the return of the light. So in December, as we make all these celebrations, we're celebrating the return of the light. We're celebrating the birth of Jesus, and celebrating the harvest and celebrating nature. It's important to remember that without a recognition of the nature of things, we wouldn't really have any concept of what else is also true. As much as we might like to, as interfaith people, and as some of us believe in God and believe in Christ as the only Son of God, and believe that idea is part of our being. There are also those of us who really believe that, like my son, there is no God, and the jury's out. Some of us believe some things, and some of us believe other things that are very important to us. And so, as an interfaith community, we recognize that all beliefs are good and true and important. So from a deeply spiritual perspective, there's only the present. And as we make ourselves present for the changes that occur in the world, we become less attached to what calendar and the clock may be thinking, may be saying to us. It's relative. It's relative. And it doesn't mean that we don't care, because we cannot live in the world and not be part of the celebrations that are happening all around us. I know some try, but I believe that we need to embrace all of it and take responsibility, absolutely, for the response according to our own beliefs, our responses. This is, it may be it is, I believe it's the only time of year that most of the religions of the world even, and most of the people in the world, I suppose, may be Christian, that everyone is familiar with this holiday, and they're really celebrating it with us. And I really appreciate that even those who don't believe really do celebrate this birth. Because I'm sure it's because we all recognize that at a level we are all being born at this time of year. We're all being born again. We're being born in nature, inside of us, and the truth. We're being born to the truth of what is. But it's just really in the last 200 years that this idea of let's give a lot of presents to each other, and let's have a lot of parties, and let's, this is how we will celebrate the season. This is how we will show God our appreciation by giving presents. But recognizing this quality of being as the birth of the child in us, I want to explore some qualities of the child in us that we may discover this time of year. We are born to live in the heart, and we live in the heart as a child. There's a passage in the Gospels: "Be as a child, or you will not be able to enter the kingdom of heaven." And what this means is, look upon life. Look upon everything you look upon as a child would look upon. So how does a child look upon the world? Carefree. A child is carefree. And how this looks like courage. Nothing is difficult for a child. A child is not conscious. A little child is not so conscious of itself, but it feels its connection with its community, its family. So my son, when he was 3 years old, I said to him, "What is your purpose in life?" And he said, "God." And I thought, wow. But that was the last time he used that word in that kind of way at all, because he's quite an atheist in his early 30s. What else? Okay, a child, a baby, a little child has resilience. One of my clients was talking to me about how her grandchild gets moved from family to family, and it's very difficult for the parents and grandparents, but the child seems to just ride the waves of these changes, and there's that child in us that can do that. And faith, a child has faith because a child looks out and sees and can rely on most things that are love and peace in their lives. But I remember difficulties as a child. I remember I would go out into nature to get my what I needed at that time when there was yelling going on in my house. But even at that time, I recognized faith, some kind of faith. And I imagine that this is what nature gave to me, a sense of what faith means, and just the word. I didn't know a lot about what faith meant, of course, and I was just beginning my indoctrination into the Catholic Church. And I imagine the idea of faith came from that teaching, but I know that I didn't have any sense of Jesus or of God at that time in my life, but I did have a sense of nature. And a child is guiltless, and although we tend to, I remember easily punishing my young son, but I also remember my first communion and being introduced to the concept of sin. And I thought, sin? What is sin? I'm not a sinner. I mean, isn't that, it's amazing and outrageous that really at that age I could know that much. I was not a sinner. And yet I took upon this mantle of sinfulness as a child, and it lasted for maybe quite a few years. It took a lot of time to get out of that, as things do that we are taught. This idea that a child is full of wonder and a sense of light, and that our birthright is to play. And the purpose of a child's life is to play and to love and to be the joy that the child is reminding us of every day. So this Christ child, these qualities of the Christ child are in us all the time. But how do we make them, how do we allow them, how do we remember them this time of year? How do we maybe change some of our behaviors this time of year? I mean, as we do, of course. We change our behavior this time of year. How do we remember? How do we express it? So let's remember this time. Remember and relive the times of pure joy in your life. And I thought, how do I do that? How do I remember those times of pure joy? And as I'm thinking, I remember that my time out in nature were my times of pure joy. And my times with my animals were times of pure joy. And my times opening presents were times of pure joy. But the people, not so much. Not so much. So I have to admit that's completely reversed. As I've gotten older, the people are what's important to me now, and the presents aren't so important. And I think that's true of most of us. We change. So use whatever you can of everything you see and experience to remember who you really are. And this includes the difficult times this time of year. Because we do have difficult times, because there is such a big part of me that says, oh, I want to be back in my family. I want to have a big Christmas dinner and I want somebody else to do all the work. Because when I was a child, I loved those times. I loved those family gatherings. I just felt the energy of them. And the simple release of joy that we all experience together. But me and my sisters did all the work. I mean, we just did all the work. So use whatever you can and find a way to ignore the rest rather than criticize or complain or condemn. Because all the time you are resisting, all the time you're complaining, you're resisting your joy and your peace, your inner peace. So it's not too hard really, because at any given time we have an opportunity to be aware of the negative feelings we also have. It's too much work. I'm too tired. So we watch ourselves, we accept ourselves, and we move beyond into the spirit, who you know you really are. It's a good time of year to step up your expressions of service and kindness, for that's where you'll find your joy. Even in very simple ways, the way we serve each other is important. Because I believe that the more important gifts at this time of year that we may think of is being the gift, and being the Christ child, and being what we are offering to each other, being the light that we're offering each other. So remember that yours is a divine birth. Yours is the birth of the Christ child, although perhaps not a virgin birth. And that idea is also in question. You're meant to be here. You're meant to be the highest expression of what you can be. And don't ever worry about what you're not. We sometimes do that. So that's another opportunity we have at this time of year to move beyond who we think we are into who we really are. The divine spirit. So let's take just a moment. Let's take just a moment and breathe deeply into that divine spirit of who we are. And remembering that all the hoopla outside of us is not us. And at any time, anywhere we are, in a comfortable place, in an uncomfortable place, all we have to do is breathe deeply and remember who we are. So let's take a moment to consider our blessings. And show up to bless each other. And when we do that, we are blessing ourselves.